Hey guys, Chris here. I'm here with the amazing Dev Raj today. Hey Dev.
Hey, Chris.
So Dev is an amazing guy, lots of wisdom, always learn a lot from him. A lot of people resonate with him. Very authentic guy. Talks a lot about, in terms of releasing holding patterns in the body, bioenergetics. He's a therapist. So he talks a lot about getting to the long-term, deeper self-esteem issues that we all face. And he talks mainly about using the body as a tool. So yeah, Dev, maybe quickly before you start talking, introduce a bit more about yourself. Yeah, so just explaining the importance of using the body and identifying what's holding us back in life.
Yeah, sure. Something that I often come back to that's really fascinating is like they did this like exit study of a load of people coming out of like one of the big motivational gurus. I won't say their name. Like 1,000 people were surveyed coming out of this guy's workshop, which had been going on for 3 days. And everyone was like pumped up like crazy. They were being asked, are you going to change your life? 99.9% have said, yes, I'm going to totally change my life. And, a month later, the people carrying out the survey did a follow-up. So they contacted all these people by email and they had to fill out a questionnaire. And what they found out was about 1 or 2% of those people had actually changed their life in terms of their behavior or their success level to any significant level. And this survey really intrigued me because I'd been around the alternative scene and the kind of success scene and the step-up scene and the motivational gurus quite a lot. So I was intrigued as to why so few people actually created change in their life. And one of the things that was often being spoken about was it was all their fault. They kind of said they were going to do it, but they hadn't done it. And I thought, well, that's a bit lame, really, as a reason. What's it really about? And I already had my own theories a little bit, which was the past and the fact that what happens in a motivational seminar when you're pumped up, when you get your energy moving upwards and you feel like, hey, I can do this, when the whole room is pumping, the top part of your brain, your higher mind, as they like to call it up here, is super active. It's changing this old low self-esteem, low self-image kind of persona that you may have adopted as a kid. And it's saying, no, I can go for it, I can do it. And you feel pumped up with energy. But the reality is, it doesn't have that much power. And the lower part of your brain, the older part, the older part of your brain, your limbic system and your brain stem, they're trying to clear the holding out of your whole system, not just give you like a positive self-image, so what happens is over time, so someone comes out of a seminar, they're pumped up, they're going to change the whole world, they're going to change their life, they're going to leave their job, start their own business, get a new girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. And 2 weeks later, they're right back where they started. And the reason is that they got too much holding in the body. There's too much holding in their body. So it doesn't really matter what your mind thinks. Something I often talk about these days is it doesn't really matter what your self-esteem is. It's actually nowhere near as important as people believe. And a lot of new age gurus will tell you because they want to make money out of you, basically. It's not that important. It's not nothing, but it's not so important. And so the main thing is to really work at a physical level and work in the job of whatever you're trying to push out in the world, that you stick with it and you keep going, and that you use something like bioenergetics, which is a body movement therapy, to start to clear the holding out of your whole system so that you have positivity on a daily basis and you have resilience, and you have energy. You have energy to do stuff. When you need to, you can just bring your whole energy up and project it forwards, or you can just really focus on a task and do it. And this is what, it's got immense practical possibility. I'm writing a book about success at the moment and like the bodily component of success. And it's really about this, but in it, I also basically capture I study, just studying success, because psychologists don't usually do that. I'm a therapist, basically, and they don't usually study success. They're usually obsessed with introspection on someone's childhood and past and clearing up the issues and all of this blah, blah. And actually, you don't really need to do very much of that stuff. You need to move forwards and see what the blocks are that come in your way and find a way through them. I'm talking a little bit randomly here, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an idea of what I'm about.
No, that opens it all perfectly, Dev. And Yeah, for myself, I've dabbled in and out of, like I did a bioenergetics workshop with you. I found doing exercise of a morning or yoga and these practices, when you do them, you do feel great afterwards and you feel sometimes even more motivated, more clear. So, for you, what is it? Because I think a lot of people into self-improvement do read a lot of books and they're
Yeah.
working all the time and maybe in COVID as well. I mean, what is the importance of having a routine, and how much time should people spend each day exercising their body, and how as well do you get past those thoughts which I've been having as well, which is yeah, yoga, I've not got time for yoga, or I've not got time to do a bit of exercise today. It's not really that important. What's important is I work. So how do you help get past that as well?
Well, for me, my own personal practice, I'm usually doing something for about 30, 40 minutes in the morning, soon after getting up, which is generally bioenergetics of some sort. And I'll stick with a kind of routine for months at a time and then maybe change a bit or something different. But, it's important that you do it, basically. And then what happens is you have to just look why you don't do it and what that's about, or you just have to look practically, how can you get yourself to do it? you
Mm,
know there's different ways. Accountability is one way, having a friend who's also committed and you can check in with each other. Did you do it? Because the way our ego tends to function is that if we think we're being held accountable by some external force, then we're more likely to do something. You just have to find what works for you on a practical level to get you doing a practice daily. If it's beating yourself up unrelentingly because you didn't do it, that can work. It's okay. If it's just having like a little thing where you have to tick off each day that you've done it and you feel good every time you make that tick, then that works. Mostly you have to do something. If it's going into an environment where you have to do it, I was in a spiritual community for 17 years living there, and everybody on a certain program had to get up in the morning and do and do an hour of meditation. No, not sitting meditation, but they had to do something. And what you learn, of course, is sometimes you're really up for it, sometimes you're totally not up for it and your mind's got 7 good reasons why you wouldn't do it. Other times you're a bit ambivalent, but each time you have to do it. And at some point it becomes ingrained in your awareness that it's important to do this. But until you get to that point, you've just got to look pragmatically and practically what you can do to get yourself to do it. Because if you study the habits of successful people, I'm just talking about success here,
mm,
and then whether it's success in money and life or relationships or love or this kind of thing, you have to work. You have to work stuff. It also gives you a basic discipline in life so that you can, you know, uh, get into a task and keep doing it and keep doing it.
mm.
A lot of what has happened in the alternative scene looks great, but is actually pretty superficial. This is my opinion right now. It's really not that important if you have good or bad self-esteem. It's not as important as people think. What matters is your willpower.
Mm.
If you don't have much willpower, what can you do to develop it? Because you can slowly develop it. What was the second part of the question? Sorry, I forgot it.
Yeah, that you so all that was great, Dev. Thanks for sharing.
Mhm.
So yeah, just the mind sort of has a tendency to say, "Oh, I'll leave it today,"
Yeah,
or I think it's more, "Is this actually working?" So what I found when I do bioenergetics or dynamic meditation or these sort of things, you can sometimes be in your head like, "This is a waste of time. This is not
yeah,
working."
yeah,
It's kind of you're talking yourself out of it. But
yeah.
how do you help yourself become more grounded and realize that this is a solution and it is important?
I guess something that I've used a lot myself is understanding that what really happens inside the brain is that there is a kind of defensive layer that operates just below the level of our conscious awareness. And when something is being triggered for us, before we really become aware of it, these defenses come in and they tend to do, and the bottom line is you have to stop what you're doing, or it's like the basic way that anxiety manifests inside of someone is through this story telling you you're not okay right now, that you need to do something to change your state. And in like manner, if say you're doing your yoga act exercise or your Wim Hof or your bioenergetics in the morning, and one day it's like, oh, there's no point in this anymore, or whatever, nothing's happening, blah, blah, blah. You have to use that as a signpost. but in all likelihood, something is happening underneath the surface, but your defensive layer knows the easiest way to get you out of there is to play a narrative that this is pointless and there's nothing going on. So it's learning to stick with something and learning to use the belief that something is useless as a kind of signpost that something might be going on. Now, of course, you know, it's not infallible, because it may be that the practice you've got is not really working for you or something like that, and you do need to drop it. But if you get a sudden urge to drop it, or a sudden belief that it's all wrong, crap, or that you've forgotten to ring up Fred or send him a message like you said you would, or whatever, which you know you could leave for half an hour, but you just suddenly feel motivated to do it right now, those things are an indication that something is going on underneath the surface. You have to learn somewhere to be quite skeptical about what your mind is saying, you know, and not to just disbelieve it, but to also be willing to challenge it, or just really check it out. You know, if I'm doing my bioenergetics and it's like, oh shit, I meant to ring that woman, or I said this client that. Do I need to do that right now? Do I need to do it right now? Answer, no. I can keep doing my little workout, you know? It's like challenging what your mind says to take you out of the place.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, if you want it, you can get it. You know, if you want it, you can get it. But it does come down to you. It's like when someone becomes committed to something, the capacity to commit to something is incredibly important. And it's like, once you understand that, you can do it in an intelligent way. It's not that you have to necessarily work yourself into the ground, but once you've got a kind of surrender to doing something or to achieving something, then you can do it, because you will slowly work forwards into towards the goal that you want to achieve.
Yeah, exactly. And Dev, that's like kind of felt in your body. I mean, you talked a lot about like people are just separated from their mind and their body. It's like they're walking around in their heads thinking they know what they want, like what this is, but then that's just maybe what their parents wanted for them. That's just what they've been told their whole life. They don't. But then when you start to connect more with the body, because I found through dynamic meditation, for example, when I started to really get into it, and I'm very expressive, I feel now when I'm around people, I'm a lot more, I can just quickly get in my body and not be too uptight and stiff. So, but then these things, when I'm sometimes was about to do them, it's like, I've not got the time, this doesn't really work. And I've realized how important it is. And, you know, to like we talked about, expressing anger and shouting and these sort of things, which we don't, or screaming, you know, this is what bioenergetics does. So, you know, how important is it in terms of your own happiness to get in touch with your own body, and how essential is it just to live a fulfilling life?
Well, one thing about what you just said is, like, you know, screaming and shouting and this kind of thing is a little bit different from bioenergetics. In fact, probably where the deeper therapy scene is at the moment is not so much into catharsis. You know, catharsis, you know, raging and ranting and having a massive freak out feels good. And it's not that it doesn't achieve anything, but it's often what we think we need, because the mind is saying, if I could just scream my guts out, I would be okay. If I could just cry myself apart, I would be okay. And so people then reach out to therapists to go for that kind of thing. But what I noticed working in this scene for 20 years, or being in the scene for 20 years, so as a student initially, and then you know, as a therapist, is that catharsis is also a little bit limited and gets a little bit drug-like, and it is useful. And dynamic meditation is great. It's got a cathartic stage, the second stage, where you scream and shout. But it's also it's not ultimately so important, you know, I don't think. I think bioenergetics tends to go a bit deeper. And what's kind of useful about it, because when you talk about excuses, you know, it's not easy for many people to do dynamic meditation in the morning, because, you know, have you got an environment where you can shout your head off? Most people, especially if they're living in a town or a city, the answer to that is no. They cannot just make a massive, great racket in the morning. So they have to get a bit more creative about, you know, stuff. And that's where something like bioenergetics comes in. And what was the second part you asked? Because I just wanted to pick that up in case people were under, you know, it's not necessary that you necessarily scream and shout. Emotional fluidity is useful, you know, and the fact that you can be in emotional states, you know, that you can feel hurt, emotionally, and that you can express that, that you can share it with someone, that you don't get stuck
Mm,
avoiding it, and rigidify, or that you can set boundaries and get angry, and that you have a kind of fluidity and a competence with emotions that can only come through experience. You can't really
mm.
read about it and get it. It doesn't really work like that. That is important. Was that the second bit? I'm not
Well,
sure.
the second bit was more like how important it is to get in touch with your body. Like you got a lot of people who just don't feel their feelings.
Yeah.
They keep it all in. They're tight in their, they've maybe got back issues and,
Mm.
tight hamstrings, or, like all this sort of stuff that I've been through my whole life. But it seems the
Yeah.
more I'm easier able to bend over now and stretch myself and I feel less pain there.
Mm.
And I
Mm.
seem to feel more in contact with myself and my, feelings that are essential, aren't they? They teach us, it's intelligence, and releasing tension out of the body is important, because it's normally holding some sort of trauma or some sort of, I don't know,
Mm.
something about ourselves that we can't really express. People who
Yeah.
maybe can't be angry, like very nice guys, for example, maybe they have a stiff back, and they, yeah, you can just see they're in their mind, and they're not feeling the anger at all, are they?
Well, there's different ways that
Mm.
people do these things. Often with nice guys, they're a bit more collapsed. They're the endurer personality type, or sometimes oral personality type. And I mean, they can also be kind of like a ball of rage, but they're not really letting it out at all. You can see there's a lot of inner tension. So, of course, like you're saying, the mind and the body are totally related. And in many ways, the body is it's kind of a dumping ground of the ego. Basically, it's
Mm.
for all the stuff that we don't really want to feel or show when we're just trying to present ourselves a certain way. It's being shoveled back into the body, and the body's not so happy about it. And it's kind of like you can get away with doing this, in a little bit. It's similar to what's going on in the world. You can get away with dumping crap everywhere for a while, but in the longer run, it's not a good strategy. It's not a good long-term strategy. You can dump a bit of crap, and then you've got to clean it up at some point. And for most people who suffer chronic illness later in life, or maybe after the age of 40, and there's a surprisingly high number of people that do, there's probably going to be a very big psychological component and a lot of stuff stored in the body. Not necessarily, but for a lot of those guys, there will be, and the reality is that how your body is, you can be active and fit and have a really great life right up into your 60s, 70s, 80s, I'm sure. But you need to look after your body on quite an intelligent level and an emotional level. Just doing yoga or doing the gym or whatever is great, but it is not really specifically designed to deal with holding that's coming from repressed feelings. That's why bioenergetics is kind of useful, because it is a body movement technique. So you are using your body, but it's also slowly, cumulatively taking out the holding from within.
Yeah, amazing stuff, Dev. Thanks for that. And I think the thing I take away is not ever just one thing to focus on. I think you was even telling me about like yoga teachers can have a lot of stuff held in the body still, which you might see them bending over backwards and flexible, and then
Mm.
sometimes with people you say that got quite strong egos, or they don't feel as, but then you can at least sense that there's stuff that they're not letting go of, that they're holding
Mm-hmm.
on to. Yeah, Dev, I was going to say, because I've not really had a chance too much to talk about yourself in terms of your story and how you got to where you did. I know you did a talk for me about understanding how trauma is not necessarily a bad thing, as I know you teach, and allowing yourself to go there and feel certain feelings physically. So yeah, I guess maybe just if you can quickly sort of talk about your own story and what's brought you to this point and made you realize, obviously brought you to being a therapist and teaching bioenergetics in particular.
Well, I guess I went through my life. I came from really quite a traumatized background of my original parents couldn't keep me. I was mixed race, and I was adopted at a very, I don't know exactly what age, but a few months. And my childhood was not so great. There's two other adopted kids I was brought up with, brother and sister, and there was a lot of drama and bad stuff going on in the family in reality. And I just kind of took it how I dealt with that, really, I was also hospitalized quite a bit with various health issues and stuff with my legs and blah, 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 blah. And how I kind of took it was, I decided that, I was just going to grit my teeth and survive and just get out at some point, basically, as soon as I was old enough, and so I kind of went along with my childhood and my parents, my adopted parents, but I also kind of internally, my way of coping with it was like, okay, I'll be kind of subservient and good on the outside, but inside you don't get me. Inside you don't get me. I'll keep my freedom on the inside, in my inner world. And then, like that, I kind of got a job. Both my brother and sister had dropped out quite a bit, really, and I got a job, I guess, in a way to kind of like please my parents in a sense, but almost that they just wanted to have some good kids, and we weren't really very good in the traditional sense. And so I thought I'd get a job, but I kept it for about 2 or 3 years, and then I just dropped out myself, and I was living on the street. I was a punk for a long time and a hippie and this kind of thing. I worked as a busker on the London Underground for about 6-7 years. I squatted in North London, mostly around Camden, for about 8 years. I was heavily involved in counterculture and general, anything to do with authority and opposing authority, I was quite into. There used to be these things called the Stop the City March, which was kind of popular back in the 80s, where you'd all march, loads of us scruffians would all march into like the city of London, outside the Bank of England, and kind of shout at the cops for a bit, and the cops would whack you over the head with batons and stuff, a kind of realized engagement and this kind of thing. And I was involved in all of this, and in my 30s, I guess I saw myself becoming more kind of alcohol dependent, but most of my friendships were just based around alcohol or casual drug use. But I was still hanging out with a lot of punks. I became mired in crime in the West End for a few years as well, and got in trouble with the cops quite a bit. And at some point, coming towards the end of my 30s, I just sat down and kind of at some point just could see that I just really wasn't having the kind of life I would have chosen. If I could have been a little soul or whatever, just getting born, I would not have chosen to be like this age 38, strung out and mired in all sorts of dodgy things and stuff, and just kind of lost, and dependent on substances. I would not have chosen that life. And I saw that kind of clearly, and I was kind of thinking like, well, what do I have to do? And the idea came up that I should do therapy. So I thought, okay, I don't know anything about therapy, but I see that all it was in my mind was like, I need to do therapy. And so I also hadn't had a girlfriend for quite a long time at that point. And I thought if I did some therapy, maybe I'd get a girlfriend and my life would be better. So I just started looking around London for therapists and trying a few different things out. And I came across quite a good guy at the Open Centre in Old Street, and I was doing group therapy there with a load of people, or kind of low-level group therapy for a while, like these 2-hour sessions once a week, and that was kind of good. But after a few months, I realised that I was just I saw myself as way too hardened. Really, I wasn't really, it wasn't really getting to me. It wasn't really getting to me. It was like I had a layer of concrete on the outside of my psyche, and I needed a bit more than all these kind of nice middle-class people who wanted to introspect on their childhoods to actually push me beyond that. So I started looking out again, and I came in contact with the sannyasins, who, this was about 2000, the year 2000, and the sannyasins were the old Osho followers. He died about a decade before, but they were kind of wild and out there, and they were very into really extreme therapy. And somewhere around North London, I came in touch with that. I started to do dynamic meditation, which it turned out was going on just down the road from where I was living in King's Cross at the time, and then got kind of sucked into the sannyas scene. And there were also a lot of women in the scene who were kind of free and easy, which was pretty cool. And so I just got immersed in that scene, and I started to do workshops at a place called the Humaniversity in Holland, which was an Osho center, but also a very strong therapeutic community. And I spent about 8-10 years going there, or doing some level of residential program there, doing therapist training there. And that was very intense experiential work, mostly conceived by a guy called Viresh, who's no longer with us, a little black or a little short. half black, half Jamaican, half Dominican Republic guy from New York who was an ex junkie himself, and he'd come out of being a heroin addict through therapeutic communities, which were a thing being explored in America in the 70s. They'd get all these junkies and put them together, and we'd have to work their stuff out, guided by former junkies who kind of come through this process. And so what he'd kind of done, this guy Varesh, was set up a commune. He'd been involved with Osho as well, where he would take the most extreme kind of therapies that he knew, useful for treating quite hardcore heroin and methadone addiction and stuff like this, and just bring them into more of a spiritual kind of context. So you'd have these kind of 5-day long encounter groups where everyone was going into all their negative feelings about each other and screaming and shouting. There was a lot of work with sexuality. There was a lot of work with primal issues around early childhood and stuff like this. And it was a very kind of wild kind of scene. And when I came into it in around 2000, it was softening up a bit, but it was still very full on. And so I ended up doing work there for about, like I say, 8-10 years. And then I slowly, in that time, I'd moved into a spiritual commune, an Osho commune in the UK, Osho Lila. And at some point, I just started to run workshops there and start to get involved in program there. So I didn't come up really through the therapeutic mainstream, so to speak. And I think if I had, it wouldn't really have worked for me. So I am quite skeptical about how effective most of the therapy you would encounter in a country like Britain actually is, as compared to what I personally did and went through and what I needed to do and go through to kind of come out the other side. But as I started to teach myself, I started to work a lot with emotional expression, anger groups and this kind of thing, and getting people to go into the sadness as well. But I also came to understand that, as I started to move out of Lila, the spiritual community, it was clear that it wasn't so easy. There wasn't such a demand for workshops working with anger, really. And also, it just made a lot of noise, and you couldn't really practice one-to-one with clients, because in therapy rooms, there's some guy giving psychotherapy next door doesn't want to listen to someone screaming their head off for half an hour. It's not really working. So I'd also learned bioenergetics when I was at Human University. There were trainers there from Brazil in bioenergetics. And I just decided to start picking that up again and doing bioenergetics. And that morphed slowly into me running a bioenergetics channel on YouTube, which became quite popular and generally, a part of a kind of slowly mushrooming kind of therapy scene on YouTube, where different therapists were putting ideas out. And nowadays that, so I was leading workshops in emotional expression, then moving into leading workshops with bioenergetics, and just slowly developing my own kind of take on it as well. I've always been quite innovative. I've always been a little bit of an authority tripper. I've definitely kind of got through a few layers of that, but I still get triggered by stuff with authority. But the positive part was that it made me quite innovative, and not really just following the line, but in order to be a psychologist, you have to have a PhD, and then you have to kind of join the British Psychological Society and wear a jacket and read The Guardian and this kind of thing, So, I developed my own take, and now I'm setting up my own school, basically the British School of Bioenergetics, which has kind of slowly happened. I started an online course in bioenergetics last December. That's now got about 55 people on it, so it's been a huge success. Probably fueled a little bit by the lockdowns and all the COVID stuff, because bioenergetics is quite a deep therapeutic process, but you also don't need a lot of close contact, as they nowadays call it. So you can do it in relative isolation, as compared to a lot of the therapeutic work that I was doing 20 years ago. You could not do in a lockdown kind of situation. It would not be possible. So it's worked out quite well for me so far, and I just slowly chug along with it, basically. And I think that's about it, really.
Yeah, no, Dev, it's amazing, great inspirational story. I know you've obviously been through so much, and hence why you've got so much wisdom. And yeah, and I think you can relate. You've obviously done a mixture of different things. You've got knowledge in all different areas, which is great. So I guess as a final point, Dev, just for the people watching this, again, why you would recommend bioenergetics, how people can get started. I know you've got an amazing YouTube channel as well, so maybe you could maybe there's a couple of videos people can recommend, and just, I guess just to give it a go. So more to people who've never done it before. And what would you sort of say to them?
Yeah, for sure. Check out I've got my YouTube, look for Devraj Bioenergetics on YouTube. I've got bioenergetics.org.uk, my website, and I've got a book there and all the usual kind of stuff. And you could look for there's a series of workouts called Dev's Lockdown Challenge, which I did in sort of April leading onwards this year. There's 10 workouts in total. You could pick a workout from there to give yourself a real experience. If it's a bit too much for you, whoever's doing it, look for a video called maybe Getting Started with the Bow and Arch, and just give something a try. Give some workouts a try and just see how you get along with them and how it feels. On the YouTube channel, there's a lot of talk and stuff and explanation and some theory and looking at exercises, and some are like workout videos. And those are kind of in a playlist called, because I made it the other day, follow along workout videos, where I could put all the kind of workout videos together of the last 5 years. So just random, what I recommend is, because like if you're getting involved in self-development or therapy, how it usually goes is it's kind of like walking around a mountain, you're kind of checking out different paths and seeing which one looks okay for you or is going to work for you, and just check out bioenergetics like that. Try a few things. And if it looks like it's working for you, then check out what you can do to keep traveling up the mountain by that path. And if it's not working for you, then carry on walking around and check out the next thing, basically.
Amazing stuff, Dev. Thanks for today. Really enjoyed the interview. And yeah, I continue to learn so much from you. I know my audience really resonate with you as well. Authentic, honest, and with all of this great advice to give, and just the importance of connecting with your body, which is something that you just can't avoid, and can't, something at some point I believe for everyone will eventually have to look into. And everyone goes on a different journey, so I guess we can just dabble and integrate this into our practice. So thanks again, Dev, and yeah, I'll catch you soon. Yeah
thank you, Chris. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem.